So, hello and good afternoon or good morning or greetings for wherever and whenever you're listening to this. So, I'm your host, Miko, and I'm the
Nico.
host of this show called Speaking with Speakers. So, tonight we have in store for you, we're having a panel discussion on education in the Philippines. We're going to be covering four topics in different degrees. So I'm going to go over those for you right now. So we're going to tackle the transition to K to 12. So for those of you who don't know, the Philippines recently underwent a change that transitioned to a K to 12 curriculum, which added 2-year levels in the secondary education in the years of secondary education. Next, we're also going to talk about the effects of the pandemic on the educational system. We're talking about formal and informal education. And lastly, we're going to talk about a couple of tips for students, for those of you who are still students listening to this show. But before we go to that, I'd like to introduce our panelists first. So the first panelist I invited for this discussion this afternoon is none other than one of my favorite teachers when I was still a student. I can't ever forget when he handled Constitution. I was under his Constitution class, and as well as what other class? History. So I was under history as well. He's been an educator for over about 15, 16 years. And he's from Cebu Institute of Technology University, none other than Ray de la Victoria.
Good afternoon, guys. Have a nice day. Stay safe, guys. Good afternoon.
Good.
Thank you, sir. All right. So the next panelist that I invited for this talk that we're gonna have, she's also been an educator for how long have you been teaching, Mariam? For 7 years, you mentioned. Yeah, she
Yeah, 7
primarily
years.
7 years. She primarily works with kids. And where are you teaching from?
I'm teaching in Abbas Orchard Montessori School.
Yeah. So I really love Montessori schools because I came from a Montessori school myself. And this is none other than my colleague in Toastmasters and one of our past presidents in the club where I come from, Toastmaster Mariam Soliano. So
So
thank
hi,
you.
hello for all those who are listening.
Thank you, Toastmaster Mariam. All right. So last but not the least for this afternoon, it's actually one of my friends which I met through mutual acquaintances. So he's actually a good friend of one of my mentors before. She was my prime minister, Jennifer Holianes, who now works in China, training Chinese debaters. He is currently also a business owner, and he is the founder of Outspoken Philippines, a educational institution which trains students in speaking and debating. So this is none other than Bolo Pascual.
What's up, guys? I'm super glad to be here. Thanks for the generous introduction, Nico.
All right. So thank you again, all of our panelists for being here. Honestly, I'm kind of nervous. This is the first time I'm hosting something like this. I hope my
Take it easy.
nervousness isn't very apparent.
It's
All
fine.
right.
Doing well.
So let's I'll share my screen again and then let's start the conversation. So first of all, we're gonna talk about K to 12. So I think these are the couple of guide questions that I had. So how was the transition to K to 12? Did it change things for you personally where you were teaching? And how were you personally affected? Was there going to be a change? Was there not really a change? So I think we already tackled this a bit in the banter that we had before. So let's go back to Sir Ray. So
Yeah.
you're talking about uh, the transition. You were hoping that maybe the students will become more mature when they enter college. So let's pick up on that part. Surrey.
Yeah, that was the kuan. That was the expectation, considering that we are also being prepared because the students additional 2 years in the basic education, or in particular in the high school, it was expected that the students will become more mature and they are more knowledgeable of the things around us. But as what I mentioned uh, a while ago, Miko, it is not what I expected when it happened, when there was a full implementation of this K-12. Also, there was a fear on the university on how we can accommodate all the professors in college. That's why we were sending a lot of faculty in different seminars to be ready on the senior high school. Considering some of the faculty in college, they are not uh, a licensed teacher, that they are not really an educator technically, considering they are not a graduate. By me myself also, I'm not a graduate of education. It is just an accident why I was teaching in college. It was really an accident. It was not really my passion to be in the academy, because what really my mindset when I was young, to become rich. And I saw that if you want to become rich, you should not go to the academy. If you rely on the income in the academy, you will not become rich. Just like what happened today. Miko, consider how many months that we don't have a teaching load in college.
Yes, that's true.
Luckily, I have here the so-called the made for learners. I have one section that I teach online using this technology, just like this that we were doing today, or we are doing today, Miko online. Anyway, we are just taking this opportunity, this technology, as what the government is mandating. There was a suspension of the classes physically, and I don't know what happened next, Miko, with this. But I believe the K-12, if there are if there were objections in some sector that to be to be amended, to be abolished, and so on and so
Mm,
forth, whether we like it or not, we are in the contemporary world. We are in a globalized society. Our
yes.
educational system must also with the in conformity with other educational system for the rest of the countries in the world. Mao nang, whether we like it or not, we should adapt. Okay, this kaning 12 years in the basic education. Is it 12 years? Or
Mm,
yeah, yeah, it's 12 years. Before it is just only 10 years
10 years, yes.
education. For the rest of the countries of the world, I believe they already adopted the 12 years in the basic education. Kita ra
Yeah.
nawahi ra ta, nawahi.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay.
I think the other thing, like to go off that point, I think one of the things, maybe if you can also recall when you're back in college, I think for all of us here, I think I'm the most recent graduate, or considered graduate. But I really remember fondly, um what do you call it? I remember fondly my first year, because I was expecting there to really be a really big difference between uh, being in high school and then going into college. But then when I actually got to my first, I was actually, I found it very laughable, because I entered my first class, and in the first class I got into, it was computer fundamentals. I was going into college. I had really high expectations. I thought that, okay, this is gonna be the time that I'm not gonna be the one to solo all of the group projects. This isn't gonna be the time where everyone's gonna be responsible. We're all gonna be on the same boat. And then I enter my first class of computer fundamentals, and the first thing that my teacher asked, class, what is a computer? And I don't know, maybe for me it was a bit I don't know, maybe it's a bit basic, but maybe it's not, it didn't live up to your expectations. But how about you, Toastmaster Mariam? How, what do you recall, what did your college experience live up to what you were imagining to be when you were not yet in college?
I think for me, Miko, I remember being so excited about college, university, because you do have a certain level of maturity. and at the same time you imagine the great works that you could do in a university level.
Yeah.
So for me, I think my expectation was really high when I entered, but then a lot of it is more like a culture shock on my
Yeah.
part. I think because of the dynamics of how people would usually work, the thinking that, oh, the same thing that you could share the responsibilities with everyone, but it does not the case. It's more like who will be the one who will step up eventually. And I think, but at the same time, it's a good experience for me. It's an eye opening at the same time because I get to see the culture that we have, the educational culture. It's not something that I say now, oh, I'm proud about, but at the same time to see and to see the reality that this is where we are right now. I think that's the takeaway from me going to university. Yeah, I think it's not a perfect scenario definitely for
Yeah.
university, but you learn. I think it's the people that you met, that you encountered, the learnings you had for you to see now, oh, it's not the same for everyone.
Yeah, that's
That's the
true.
greatest takeaway I have.
Then let's move to Bolo. So talking about that kind of culture shock, of course, every school or every individual goes through a different personal transition when they go from being a high schooler, being a grade schooler, then they enter college. What would really be the highlight of the college experience for you? Because I know that you were a college, you're a varsity debater in your time as a. You're also a champion debater even, so a national champion. One of the things that I wasn't able to do or not
Mm.
yet. So
Well, yeah,
yeah,
in debate, in terms of transitioning from K to 12 programs, like in the Philippines, my first observation is that like we had more students to coach because now JHS and SHS like are two separate like institutions.
yeah,
That means they have their own debate organizations. As before the K to 12 happened, we were just teaching like high school. So I think because of the K to 12 program, there were more debate organizations that compete against each other. Uh, so before we only saw like Ateneo High School, UST High School competing, but now there's like Ateneo Senior High versus Ateneo Junior High, UST Senior High versus UST Junior High. So that was the impact in terms of like how we teach as debate coaches when that particular transition happened. But in terms of like the whole K to 12 program in general, like I'm not entirely sure like that happened during my college days. So like I didn't experience the transition. So that's all the things that I could say about it as a debate coach.
yeah. I think in terms of debate, actually, what we experienced personally for my debate organization is that we didn't adjust to senior high school right away, and we were still trying to recruit a lot of people from college. And
Mm-hmm.
then because of the 2 years gap, we actually found that it was more difficult to get college people interested in debate because there wasn't an increase in students. So we
Mm-hmm.
were just kind of recruiting to the same people which we tried to recruit the previous year, and that like kind of happened for 2 years. So in that respect, I think we had a decrease of
Yeah.
membership during those 2 years. But we're in a
Right.
better spot now, so I think that's good and also good for the rest of the debate institutions as well.
Yeah. During that
So
gap
yeah,
where there were no new college students, many debate organizations were already talking to high school debaters and already recruiting them and asking them to join in their trainings so that once the SHS transitions to college, they're already part of those debate organizations. So that's one of the impacts I saw on K-12
yeah.
of the debate community.
All right. Thank you, Bolo. So we're also talking about like did like as educators. So I think that's a good transition into did anything really change personally in our teaching for where we are teaching? So I was actually wondering, like for
Mhm.
example, for Mariam, that you actually deal more with kids. Was there actually a big change when the curriculum transitioned into K-12, or because of where you are, there wasn't that much effect that happened on your part?
Okay, so I'll just have a quick explanation of what Montessori is. The basic
Mm,
principle of Montessori is that we follow the child. So we do not really follow a certain level of curriculum, but if the child is interested, let's say in science, we'll focus in science, then we'll still give some of the mathematics and language, but the child could go beyond when it comes to the competencies. So it's really focusing on the child, and at the same time it's sensorial, it's experience based on experience. We don't give textbooks, we don't have exams, quizzes, but we want the child to really experience everything. So that's Montessori. And the K to 12 that we have right now, that is also by theory is what it promises the
Yeah.
educators and the students. Okay, so they say that in when you go to high school, senior high, you will be exposed. Okay, and at the same time, in the K to 12 curriculum in elementary side and high school, they also recognize the multiple intelligence (MI), which
Mm.
is also present in Montessori, which is all still good. Siguro the change that happened for us is on the materials that we use, because I know we use Montessori as our curriculum, but K to 12 curriculum is the basic curriculum that we give to our students as well. So before we use books that is for following the BEC basic education curriculum, and we follow the competencies of that old curriculum. But now we are following the K to 12 competencies. Then for me, the change is that I noticed how they categorize the different competencies, and I think the children can go beyond, but it's very standard. It's still very standardized. And at the same time, my experience of teaching in high school in one of the public schools for I think 3 months as an educator, I felt that the materials is already given. They think it's
Mm.
easier because it's already given, but still it lacks the creativity. We could be creative in
Mm.
how to present it, but there are a lot of materials that we could choose that we feel more comfortable. So I think that's also a change when it comes to the K to 12. It doesn't have much change in the institution that I am with right now, knowing that it's Montessori, so I could still go to the old curriculum. It's still fine as long as I give the basic competencies that the K to 12 offers. So that's for me.
Yeah. All right, thank you, Mar. But I was wondering, you mentioned it's Montessori, right? Then one of the things I remember, like as a as someone from a Montessori myself, we usually have smaller class sizes. So how much is your how many do you handle in your class?
Okay, so I'm handling upper elementary, so it's a mixed
Mm.
age group. So you're talking about grades 4, 5, and 6 all mixed up in one level. So I have 30 children in one classroom. So
Mm.
approximately you could say 10 per grade level. So when I do give my presentations to them or you say lessons to them, sometimes I give it in a group of 5, a group of 6. It depends because I usually pick up those who are interested in this kind of
Mm.
learning area. So it's still a mix. I could get a grade 4 and 2 grade 5 and a grade 6 if they're all interested in the presentation that I like to introduce to them. So that's how it is. And I think the beauty of Montessori, as you mentioned, is that children teach themselves. So you have the older kids teaching the younger kids and have that sense of fulfillment, accomplishment, because they have mastered one concept and they were able to share it to someone. So I think
Yeah.
that's the beauty of Montessori.
because because it also makes me remember like that's really good that class size. I would say it's actually because just like how we saw studies come out of Finland where it's really about the quality of the personal connection that the student has with their educator, because like just like in public schools it's very difficult to get a class size that small. And I think Sir Ray can agree that even a lot of his classes in college have have that kind of class number, like maybe going into the 40s towards 50s per class.
Tama. Okay, Miko. Considering Miko, our educational system in the country, especially in the tertiary level, it is more on commercialized, and the owner, the administration is always looking into the profit of the school, even though, as they said, that this a non-profit, and so on and so forth, so that they can avoid to pay taxes. That's why, as much as they can, they will maximize the classroom for the number of students so that they can have a higher profit. So without consideration of the outcome of the whether or not all the students will be accommodated and the syllabus that we prepared, the intended learning outcomes will be achieved at the end of the semester or at the end of the lesson. So the syllabus that I made, it's so ideal, but the implementation, it's different. Okay, it's different, especially when there was a transition of the K-12. The syllabus in college was changed also into an outcome-based education, wherein we are more on the outcome of the students or the performance of the students, not in quizzes, in the major examinations to evaluate the uh, the student, whether the student will pass or not in this subject. However, at the end of the day, okay, the administration will tell us as much as you can, your failing students would be at least 5%, or the maximum is 3%, because they are looking into basinunya. The parents will not anymore enroll their student in the university, considering that daghang failure ang mga students. So, well, that's the reality today in the tertiary level. Unlike in the state university, it is not that you are not dictated like that. In
Mm.
the state university, if you fail, you fail. If you pass, you pass. Okay, without consideration the profit, because it is subsidized by the government. However, here in our school, in our university, wherein they rely on the income of the tuition that the students will pay to the school. That's why they are pro students, not pro to the faculty.
Mm.
Whether we like it or not, if that's why if I look at my evaluation to the students, di you ko ka reach og perting dakuang nga kuan, because I'm so idealistic. Okay, there was a time that the dean called my attention, why you have a lot of uh, failures na student in this class, and so on and so forth. Well, I just explained everything. I have the class record and so on and so forth. Okay, outcomes based. That's the new uh, term that I encountered when there was a transition of the K-12 going into college. Okay, supposedly the professor in college will just give you the topic here. Okay,
Mm.
Miko, you discussed this just like you did before. Miko, you discussed. I don't know what topic that you discussed during our
I think it
taxation
was
class.
Article 10.
Article 10. That was local government. Okay. Sige. That's what I observe in this K-12 to the new to this new educational system that we have today. Okay.
Thank you, sir. I think something that everyone needs to agree on is that I think that teaching, as not only as a profession, but I would say even as an art, I think it's vastly underappreciated, because I
Mm-mm.
think is as students, it's difficult to understand the effort that's put into preparing the material for students to learn properly.
Mm-mm.
I think that, like, a lot of times we don't see, because I think especially going through like many different educators, going from elementary to high school, we're always going to have the fair share of both teachers that try really hard to really teach their students well, and then you're also going to encounter some instructors or some teachers which really do the bare minimum. And
Mm-mm.
then I think one of the things which goes, the reason it's underappreciated, and eventually teachers themselves feel the burnout, is because when you as a teacher put in the effort to really have that good education to your students, you're not paid any better than the teachers which are putting in the bare minimum. And I think that that's something that's very regrettable right now in the structure that we have. But at the same time, I think one of the points that I also like to get into is that sometimes, even if the teacher has a really good intention, like really you want to give the students that kind of lesson, sometimes there are structures like the system in place, or government structures that really prevent us from going above and beyond for our students. So what do you think about that,
Yeah, there's
Mariam?
something I'd like to
Or
say.
Bolo? So let's go to Bolo first. Yes.
So I just want to echo the idea where I feel that we have to give more autonomy to the teachers. I think many times Dep Ed has constrained many teachers that this is the right way of teaching English, this is the right way of teaching science, this is the right way of teaching math.
Mm.
And as long as you teach it the right way,
Yeah, the right way.
therefore there would be no incentive for many teachers to evolve the ways they teach, because as long as they do the bare minimum, and many times it's about regurgitating facts or making sure
Mm.
answer like correct answers in a piece of paper, and that's what the experience of many children is towards the education system. It's like a grade that I have to pass in this piece of paper rather than the whole experience. What happens is that teachers become robots because
Mm.
certain curriculum tells them you should only teach this, or this is the correct way to teach. And
All
I
right.
think,
So
yeah,
I guess that's also the reason why people underappreciate it, because they think that almost anyone can just do it. Because anyone is just given material and then they're just going to explain that material. And in fact, teaching is a lot more than that. It's
yeah,
really having that deep connection with your students.
yeah. I think the superpowers of teachers that I think is underutilized is the teacher's ability to see the certain strengths of an individual and how can we maximize that. So I think the main problem is that many teachers prioritize the lesson plan over the student, and that's where the student fails to have a good experience of their education. Because, for example, if I'm a teacher that recognizes that my student is amazing at music, at creating music, music theory, and sound engineering, but then the lesson plan is about like rocks, what the educational system is telling us is to just prioritize the lesson plan because it's part of the checklist, rather than prioritize how the student would fall in love with education, right? So I think the main job of a teacher should be about making the student love the process of learning above anything else. Because in the future, when they don't have teachers anymore, like when they're past college, for the majority of their lives, what will happen is that they will be the ones teaching themselves. So if we can prioritize love the process of learning and love your craft, love who you are and how you learn the way you learn, I think that's the best gift that teachers can give. But the education system is saying there's a right way to do it and you'll be fine. And I think that creates like students in the future that are just like filling out checklists compared to what do I love,
Yeah.
what can I learn, and what amazing thing I can make out of the ways I learn. So that's my thought about the
So I think exactly the idea that we're getting at is that I think that's the ideal Montessori experience, I would say. And but I would say that also we also can see that there are really big uh there's a lot of infrastructure that needs to change before the entire school system can actually transition into that kind of educational system. But I was wondering, like from Mariam, as a person who teaches in the Montessori style, what is one thing that you think the Dep Ed or Ched could do as a start to transition to be more like a Montessori? Maybe like what's the first step that they should take towards that kind of system?
Okay, I think number one, they really have to empower the teachers. And that's very important. Because if the teachers are empowered, the children, the students will see that. They will see that the teacher is loving life, loving the language, or loving the subject. So they would love that as well. So there are many ways to really empower the teachers. One is that they have to see the teaching is not a profession, it is a craft. It's a craft that you have to continue to develop, and you have to, to progress in it. And I think that's where Bolo as well is coming from when he mentioned that you have to give more freedom to the teachers. Like for me, I love language, I love art, I love poems and literature. I can include mathematics in literature. I can include geometry in literature. I could include other forms of subjects in literature because that's how much I know literature. So there are many ways that you could introduce a subject to the children. What is definite is that you're teaching the children the love for learning. If the child loves to learn, definitely you don't need a teacher to tell you do your assignment because the child will do the exploration by himself because he's just so curious about these things. I think another thing is that the mindset that we have that teachers are there to give inspiration. I know are there to give inspiration information. It's like based on information. They have to pass the exam. These are the competencies they need to know. But it's not that they have to inspire the soul, and that's the main job of the teacher, of the educators. So for us, siguro, you could empower also the teachers by letting them understand the students that they are with. I mean, it's not just, diba, in the system, we
Yeah.
call the students by numbers. You are number one, you are number two, based on the alphabetical order. That's how it is.
Yes, yes, yes.
But we never fail to call the child by name. The name itself, we call the child by the surname. Oh, you are this surname. You're Soliano. You're Pascual. It's like that. But no, you have to call the child by the first name because what we're teaching is not the subject, but self-construction. I think that's the number one. Self-construction above anything else. If the teacher understands that, then there would be the respect in the profession, in the craft rather, because now you know that in you lies the future. In you lies a life. It's not just a subject that you have to teach.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Mariam. So let's like I have one thing before we transition into the next part. Like how is education gonna look in this time of the pandemic? But before we move on to that, I was actually having a thought experiment the other day, and I was wondering because I don't think a lot of people, when they're criticizing structures that exist or the infrastructure, it's easy for people to claim that, oh, they're doing this intentionally, they're being lazy at their jobs, they're not working to serve the Filipino people. So there's a lot of criticism which comes from a negative place. But I was thinking about that, and I'm trying to come from a place where we don't think badly about our public servants. So I was trying to analyze, why would it result into us being disconnected from the people or the infrastructure that we're teaching? And what I came up with is something like this. Like, going up the ranks, especially, I'm not sure how it works in CHED, but probably in Department of Education, how you move up the ranks looks something like this. You graduate, you become as a teacher in elementary or secondary education. You teach for about 5 years or so. You then maybe with good performance, you're going to be pegged to become a principal of a smaller school. Then you move on to a bigger school after you serve like 2 or 3 years. And then after you become a principal, assuming that you did a good job there, sometimes you get recommended that maybe you're going to have a position at the regional office in a minor role. Then you become the head of, let's say, mathematics. And then you serve there for another 5 or so years. And then that's the only time that you also really become like the head of the region or the head of the Department of Education. So I would say that from the time that you were in the educational system and the time that you control or you have influence over the structure of the educational system, there's a lot of time that actually passes. So that's what I think leads to maybe us being a bit disconnected from the people we intend to teach, because the last time you were taught, let's say, it could like be 30 to even 50 years, assuming how much time and effort you put into improving through the ranks. So between those 30 to 50 years, I think that we can still believe that we're doing the right thing, but I think it's understandable why we could possibly be disconnected from the students when we've been outside of education for that long.
Oh, so one thing I'd like to say about that is I think so sorry, two things that I want to say about that. I think firstly, I think we need to have decision makers be involved in terms of knowing where do the youth spend their time and
Yeah.
what do they understand and what are the things that they are receptive to, because I think many educational like lessons that we provide, sometimes it's supposed to be okay, this is a good way to teach this, but we're not even sure if that method of teaching it can
Mm.
capture the attention of these children when there are many more distractions that are worth their attention or they would think is worth their attention. So I think number one is to have like people who know about the youth's attention be involved in crafting um, things for our educational system. But secondly, if we can't do that, I think we ought to take notes from the best like
Mm.
government systems that provided like good education like worldwide. So usually they're in the Scandinavian countries.
Yes.
Um, usually like when they talk about getting into grade one or kinder, they're not supposed to be trapped in boxes sitting down. They should be like walking through a forest, feeling things. And I think like those are things that are also available to countries like ours, even if we're not that rich. But I think we need to explore those types of things that the best in the world are also doing it. So yeah, those are my two things. Have
Right.
people involved in terms of where is our youth's attention, like where is it happening. But secondly, in terms of like learning from the best, let's adapt the things that we could possibly try out that would be of no cost to us. Yeah. So
Right. So thank you for that, Bolo. Okay, let's move on to our next topic. So we're talking about. I'll share my screen again. So what really are the effects that the pandemic has on our educational system? So we've canceled class, or most the DepEd and Ched have mandated a closure of class, except for those schools that have autonomous. What are they called? I'm not sure what they're called. When you're given autonomous status, so you can just choose for yourself. Then, so I'll just stop the share screen right now. It actually, like Bolo's last point actually reminds me a little bit of when we did transition to K to 12. There wasn't actually a lot of rooms ready, like for in terms of infrastructure. The rooms themselves, like schools, were not ready. And I remember that, like me coming from science, from Cebu City National Science High School, like we were really lucky and we were blessed to be in a position where like our alumni and our principal, they came together and they approached one of the government officials to use almost his entire budget to really build us a building right before the implementation of K to 12. And I would say that that actually took a lot of, I would say, some a degree of influence for that to happen. And I think that's the problem, that a lot of schools weren't really prepared for K to 12 when that happened. Then I think that that's also something which is happening right now, that I think, or I'm not sure your guys, what's your stance on this, but are parents, like, do they think that it's safe for their children to really go back to school already? Like, so like DepEd is proposing August 24 for the resuming of class. So do you think that this is too soon, or is it appropriate? Or if you are a parent, do you think that you'd already allow your child to go to school at that time? So let's start with Mariam.
All right. We had a meeting together with our parents regarding this particular topic. Are we going to open the school by that time? And majority of the parents feel really unsafe for that, because although right now we are blessed to say that the children, we don't have much cases for children, but then they can be a carrier, and that alone is also put harm to the family as well. So for us, for our institution, we're thinking of having a program where we would transition to that, even if they say DepEd would say that we will open by August. So for us, we're still going to pursue with the online teaching. That's what we've been doing for the past 3 months. And then once it's open, we're going to transition to a modified in-school, off-school approach. So there would be
Mm-hmm.
like 14 days in school, then after 14 days, there will be off school. So that would also be the time in cases if there would be virus.
Ah.
So that's the quarantine period. So we're going to follow this kind of approach to transition them. So I think we just ended our last online school yesterday, and it's really orienting everyone that this is the new normal. So we have to adjust and we have to adapt it. But how can we make it like for the children? How can we maximize this and change it into a really learning ability? I mean, opportunity for all of them. So yeah, a transitional approach is where we are now heading.
Okay, thank you. So let's move to Sir Ray for this next one, because I read earlier that not only do they propose that we're gonna come back on what you call it on August uh,
24th.
24th, but they also I saw a post. I'm not sure. Maybe I lacked the fact checking for that one, but they're also ideally having only 15 students per classroom.
That
So
was
I yeah.
Miko. That was the proposal of the national government. If we wanted to open the class on August and still the trend of this virus still rising, okay, uh, the ideal is 15 students per class. That would be that is so ideal in public school. I don't know if there are a lot of classrooms available wherein congestion of students in public school is so high, and also in private institution, private schools, okay, we're relying on the income from the tuition to be paid by the students. I don't know if they are amenable for that 15, but
Mhm.
there is a proposal with that. We call it the blended, as what Ma'am Marian said. That we
Yes,
call it the
yes.
blended learning process. Blended, you have physical, and then later on you go online and so on and so forth. Mona siya ang kon. At the end of the day, okay, mm, it's the educational system. There should be to a change of the educational system in the country, especially for allocation of the budget in our education department and the Commission on Higher
Mhm.
Education. Uh, if you want to produce a better students at the end of the day, whether in you produce a good student from elementary or in high school and in college, okay, the system must be changed. And
Mm.
here in the country, the educational system and how we are going to produce this a lot of potential students later on to become on sa scientists and so on and so forth.
Yes. Thank you, sir. So let's move on to Bolo. I think also we'd like to touch on. So again, we're talking about infrastructure. Like one of the reasons why it's difficult to really push for even the public education system to move online is because our infrastructure is just very poor compared to other more developed countries. So like compared to even the United States, it's just the access to the internet itself and even cellular data. So some people are opting for cellular. Even cellular is very difficult to reach in many locations. And I think that what's happening is we're kind of we're paying for the sin of allowing these really big corporations to dictate the internet infrastructure in our country. Just like what happened a couple of years earlier when Globe Telecom and Smart was it. They actually blocked one of those third-party internet service providers, which is trying to get into the Philippines.
Yeah, I think one thing that we ought to recognize is that the internet is access to education. So right now it's like people of privilege like us who can access the internet, but then there's still millions of Filipinos who can't access stable internet. So I think there has to, like our society in general needs to come with a recognition that the internet is knowledge. The internet is education. Like because I have a phone, now I can access like millions of books all for free. So I think that's something that we ought to recognize. I'm not sure if we should like nationalize internet or whatever. I'm not an expert about things, but I think we need to recognize that it is something crucial, especially that it's forecasted that pandemics are more likely to happen in the future because of global warming, and then we have like mosquito-prone areas and tropical areas and stuff like that. It's going to be more often that we need to see that education is really internet is really access to education, especially when we expect our students to learn remotely. But even if there are no pandemics, I think it's just practical for every citizen to have an ability to learn certain skills based on what they have that fit in their pocket. I think that's just really practical. I think we should see that way. So that's my thoughts.
Yeah. Thank you, Bolo. I think I actually can't wrap my head around it right now either, because I think also the Department of Education is pushed into a situation where they're kind of forced to resume class because we can't really keep students from learning. But at the same time, we don't have a good internet infrastructure to really transition everything online. So I actually don't know how they're. So I think that's their attempt. It's changing it to the 15 students per classroom, but I think it remains to be seen if that's going to really happen effectively when classes resume. So let's segue into our
I'd like,
next. Okay,
sorry,
yeah,
Nico, I'd like to add something lang because I think this one is very important because we notice a certain shift in our school when I know that we focus on educating the children, yes, but now this time we're also trying to educate the parents as well. So with educating the parents, I think that's very important because with, as you mentioned, sometime in the future there might be more pandemics than online kind of thing. So nowadays it's the children are spending more time with their parents rather than with their teachers, definitely. So parent education is very important, especially in understanding the child, how it works. So if we empower the parents right now, I think the children and the students will grow pretty much well because it's the parents who are with the children. So I think that's another way to solve this problem that we have right now.
yeah. I think one of the challenges that we could potentially face on that point, Mariam, is that especially for I think what in relation to what Bolo said earlier, like a lot of us are in privileged situations where we actually have time to spend with our kids. So I think one of the challenges there is that for those of us who are less privileged and maybe like the both parents work and maybe both parents work more than one job, it becomes difficult for them to even spend time with their kids in the first place. But I guess that's really one of the challenges that we need to approach together as a society, because especially that I think something that everyone's underplaying is that because they're saying that the government should be more prepared, but I think that at the same time we should all recognize that it's a global traumatic experience that we're experiencing together, and for most of us this is the first in our lifetime. Like the last time there was a plague of this severity, it was still um Spanish flu, I think. If we're gonna compare like the global ramifications of this pandemic. So yeah, I think it's really I think that's what we need to do more as a society. We need to focus on working together and like understanding each other that we're all not prepared for this. So We should just understand that we're not prepared. So let's move on to like from the mainstream educational system. Let's talk a bit more about like both the formal and informal, sorry, both the formal and informal education. So I would consider like formal education to be like that is school. And then informal education is when we sign up to become members of organizations like outside of the school. So sometimes they're in school organizations like debate clubs or debate societies like we were in Bolo, or sometimes it's outside of school organizations where we join after school, like after masters as well, like Toastmasters where we were in Mariam. So let's stop the share screen. All right. So I guess it's clear that being part of these kinds of organizations really does have a positive effect on on everyone's life. I guess the question will also be, is this also let me segue. Is this part of what Montessori schools also aim to achieve, like that kind of experience where you're really working together and working on your personal goals? That's what Montessori is pushing for, right, Mariam?
Actually, right now, although there was a transition from being in school then now being off school, but then since it's Montessori, we then utilize the material that we have, which was the internet, as the materials for teaching. And we do encourage the children to choose. There's a lot of free sites that they could go to have education. Uh, there's different academy sites that's made free for children at this time. So of course, this is very limited to those who have the internet access. But then again, for the parent education, on the other hand, it's more on equipping the home to how are you going to deal with the education of the child. Because this time, it's not like, okay, you start at 8 a.m., you'll end at 4 p.m. That's not the education that we're be having right now. If the child would still be helping the home, the child would still be doing his or her responsibilities, whatever that is. But then there's a time also for learning, and the learning is not only limited to what's written on the books, but the learning could be the personal experience when the child goes to the work together with the dad, when the child helps with the business that they have right now. So think education at this time is not just a sole responsibility of the school, and it's not
Mhm.
very limited to what's on the books, but to see that the community alone, and that's, I think, where helping each other really counts. That if the child is at home, but then again able to communicate with the lolo or the lola, have
Mhm.
history there and then, that is already education for the child. So I think for now, the what we're having right now is therefore a challenge because it's a different, we have to change our mindset of
Yeah.
what is really education, and then we have to be creative and be open to the different ways when we could educate the children. So do not be limited, do not think that it's only through internet alone, because out there's still a lot of things, ways that the child could still learn.
Mhm. So yeah, especially on that point, like I think that the true essence of learning isn't really something that people should feel is imposed on them. I think true education is really something that you seek for yourself. I think let's move on to Saray. I'm actually curious. When you were a student, were you part of any organizations? Like maybe you were a student leader, maybe you were maybe in your own debate society. I'm not sure.
In college, we I officer in the political science society and a debate society in college, and also in the so-called Supreme Student Council. However, later on, because of time constraint on my part and also economic aspect, that's another consideration on my part at that time, considering I'm from the province going to the city. So, and then you enter into an organization that is an extracurricular activities, and you need a lot of expenses for that as well. Yeah, because of that limited financial assistance, okay, I was constrained with that, and later on I give up, and so on and so forth with that different organization. But it really helped also to mold you as a student when you enter into a certain organization wherein you love the advocacy within that organization. Okay, but that's your advocacy, and you join that, and it can improve your life also as a student at that time, upon entering into a certain organization. However, at the end of the day, ang status lagi nimos kinabuhi, your economic status could also be a factor why you cannot continue to pursue to join that organization, because that is additional expenses in your part. Yeah, my expenses or my allowance is just for one pamasahe every day, going to school and back home, and just a snack for during or after the class. But it really helped me, that debate society in school, as well as in some other student organization. But the Supreme Student Council that we had, but it was under the whims and caprices of the administration. So I decided not to continue, because we cannot we don't have the so-called the academic freedom, because at the end of the day, the final decision will be on the administration. Unlike in the state university, that the voice of the student is stronger than the student
Oh
organization
yes.
within the private universities. Mona ikuan. Okay. But Nico, I don't know if you still remember that I mentioned probably in the first day of the class. Okay, I asked students, what is your intention in going to school? And I believe most of the answers of the students at that time, okay, and even at the present, that they want to learn in my class. But I always told them that you cannot learn from me. You cannot learn from school. Okay, you only learn when you are outside school. Because learning for me, not in school, but in life. What I can give to you is just an information. Information that I will be telling you that you can use as you face the realities in life. We're talking about, go and we're talking about constitution. Okay, you will not learn that in just 54 hours in college. And I studied that in Polsci and in the law school for a lot of semesters. Okay, you can learn the articles of the Constitution in life as you face realities, what happened in the government, and so on and so forth. Also, we are talking about taxation. You can only learn taxation in life, Miko, di ba? Okay,
Yeah.
not, not inside the four-cornered room. Eh. Okay, learning, the true learning for me, that's my philosophy. The true learning is in life. When we go to school, okay, we are bombarded a lot of informations. It could be a tool, a weapon for us as we face the realities in life. That's my thoughts probably, Miko. If I still remember in my class, the first day of my on the first meeting was a class in Nato. Okay, okay,
Yeah.
thank you, Miko.
Thank you, Sir Ray. Yeah, I think Bolo has something to say. Yeah.
Yeah, actually, I really do agree that most of our learnings happen in life. And here's where I really find it curious why our education system right now doesn't incorporate certain subject matters that even children at the start of 7 years old like would use in real life. For example, money. I think we lack like subjects in grade school with money when we are already given allowance, right? So I think in terms of like teaching us how do we raise funds, would it be cheaper if I buy my snacks like from the store, Or is it possible if I could gather my classmates like money to buy snacks, and we can buy something in bulk for double the products? And I think it's because those are the things that we use every day, but we are not educated about. So for me, like I only learned about like investing like when I was already in college. But during my time, it was still okay for people younger than 18 to have their own stocks. And I
Yeah.
think like the education system failed to teach us that. But if I could have started earlier when the current law still allowed me to invest as a 14-year-old, like I could have made like millions right now in pesos.
You could
You
be a
know?
billionaire.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, exactly. And I just think like we use money every day for transportation, all those things, and we're just kept in the dark about it until we're adults, and then we find out, oh man, there's like a whole new field that I could have learned when I was a child. So I think our traditional education ought to be reflective of what we face in real life, so
Yeah.
that it's more like effective and people could like students could understand in reality like what percentages mean. Because if I know like these factors of percentages inside like class but also in my investments, then now I have something that incentivizes me to learn the subject further or deeper, or obsess about it. So I think things ought to be more reflective with reality, and that's something that we could talk about as
Yeah.
Uh, Sir Bolo, probably that's already a part of the new curriculum in college in making a syllabus that we call it the outcome-based education. That not only that you are talking about theory to your students, but you apply a theory in the real life. That's why supposedly the ideal for professors in college in evaluating students whether you will pass or not, it's the outcome or how the student learn in the real life of the theories that you thought inside the classroom. Okay, I'm talking about taxation and how you learn it outside. Okay, as I'm talking about income tax, I'm talking about value added tax and so on and so forth. What you learn outside when you buy things, what have you noticed, and so on and so forth, di ba? Okay, that's outcomes based ba education. Supposedly, mautanay, uh, that's what we are going to do. However, okay, that is so ideal, but ano siya ni, the behavior of the students in college, it seems that they are just a baby. It seems that there's phone feeding and so on and so forth, nga mauni, mauna, so on and so forth. At the end of the day, more na, it's only a theory and it is not applied in the realities in life ba. Mo na naka problema. That's the problem. Okay. Thank you, Sir Bolo.
yeah,
I think
I think that's
for
a step
me,
forward in terms of yeah,
Let's have
go ahead.
Mariam for first, Bolo.
no, I was just trying. I just want to connect that because I hear the problem of for those who are working with higher age groups now. How can I introduce these higher concepts if they're still not yet ready? So I have to
Mm.
lower down my standards and cater to the needs of my students. But I think that's the importance of the elementary and the high school levels because I hear Bolo when he mentioned that, why do we have to wait college to introduce business when we could introduce business as early as when they're in elementary, when they could
Correct.
create some things and show it to them so that by the
Correct.
time they go to high school or senior high or even college, here comes the bigger picture of business. So that if we could just connect our educational system and see what is it that the higher education really needs so that we could support coming from the lower levels and then give the right parang skills that the children so that they will be ready for the next level. That's really important in our educational system. Or else the higher levels just keep on giving lower standards because these are the
Yes.
students that they receive.
Let's go
That's
back to
right.
Bolo.
What I can say about I think outcomes based learning is like I think it's a step forward to the right direction, because I do agree with Surrey that many things are in theory, but like we need to test it out if it happens in real life, because like education is really about preparing the individual for real life. So for like one glaring example for me is that there are many marketing professors that could say these are the theories and I value the students who have high grades, but then I don't think like these marketing professors are like have more experience than those younger children who have like mastered how to get attention on Instagram, how to get attention on TikTok, how to get attention on YouTube, right? So I think like there could be a professor with a PhD about marketing, but that professor can't gain like the attention of hundred thousands of people. But there could be this 9-year-old who is like addicted to Nerf guns and say, I love Nerf guns, buy these Nerf guns. I'm an affiliate marketer. I think that 9-year-old like has more practical knowledge than many of the theories that are being placed in the academe. So that's why I really do believe that outcomes based learning is practical. Like just like in Tagalog, if I just say, sige nga kung ganito yung tamang gawin, edi gawin mo. Pakita mo sa akin kung tama yan. So I just really think that outcomes based learning also puts the makes the teacher put their money where their mouth is.
Yeah. I think like to parallel on both of those points, like we should expose people to more complicated forms earlier. Like Elon Musk, so like the tech billionaire Elon Musk, actually started his own school a couple of years back, and the school that he opened, it's only available to Tesla employees. And only last year or this year, I think, they're opening it to individuals who aren't Tesla employees. And if you look at the if you look at the curriculum that he presented in his school, he's teaching grade 7 students astrophysics, and he's really trying to create the next batch of engineers by really exposing these children to those more complex problems at an early age. But of course, it comes in a more simple way. It comes in the form of like those textbook kind of problems or word problems, but the subject matter is already that of the higher like astrophysics, for example. But I think to parallel also on, like, really sometimes students aren't prepared when they enter college, and then we're forced to degrade our standards as teachers. It really reminds me, like, sometimes us as a department, we really want to strive more to really push for our students to be more innovative, especially for computer engineering, because we're at the forefront of development. Computer engineering is where hardware and software are supposed to meet. But then sometimes it becomes a difficult task when we're given students from that went through high school, that also went through senior high school, and when they get to college, they haven't interacted with a computer yet. It's difficult for us to expect these students to bring out the new innovation, to bring out the game changers in society when they lack that previous experience in their high school and in their more formative years. So even a computer, like something that we're very familiar with, some of these students, they haven't even had a computer yet. They haven't interacted with a computer yet until they arrived in college. So I think that's a complex issue. Let's go to Bolo.
Oh, okay. So actually, I wrote something down about it. So I think that in the past, but even still now, I think technology is being demonized in the in the education system. At least from my experience. And like how does that happen like in real life? So for example, like no cell phones allowed, or like technology being confiscated. If you have like a digicam, you have the school can take it. The school can take your cell phone, or telling the students focus on the blackboard and the teacher. So don't bring a laptop because you'll be distracted from the blackboard and the teacher. And I think like the effects of that when it comes to college is that, like, for me, like I didn't know how to use like PowerPoint effects or video editing, because like my whole time in high school, like I wasn't allowed to bring a laptop, I wasn't allowed to bring a cell phone, I wasn't allowed to bring a digicam. And so I think, but not only there's bad effects on the students when we demonize technology, I think there's also like a bad effect on the teachers as well. Because now that
Yeah.
teachers are forced to go online, teachers don't know the different ways to teach online, or sorry, to teach. Like for example, in a Zoom call, what I can actually
Yes.
do is make like a background of me of a video, and then pretending that I'm listening, and leave the actual like Zoom call, but my video is still there.
Yes. Yes.
Like I'm listening in class silently. So I think because we weren't accustomed to technology, like we didn't know like how many students can hack the system, or for example, they may not, we may catch them plagiarizing, but we don't know that there are like things on the internet where you can paste something and it will paraphrase it for you so that
Yeah.
you're not plagiarizing something, but it's still not your thought, right? So I think we need to accept technology, because many students like you and me will know different ways on how to hack it. So I think we gotta embrace it, because we need to understand the incentive structures of students wanting to cheat in those particular classes, and know like how they do it, so we understand if we are being effective, if they're actually attending the class, or if they
Yeah.
actually made their. So those are my thoughts about
Yeah.
technology and
So
embrace.
yeah, I'd like to move this to Mariam, because I think exactly the point of like the Montessori kind of education, where we create the environment where students not only are not required to cheat, but they don't want to cheat either, because they're invested, they're interested in the subject matter. Is that right?
Yes, actually, the idea of there's no exams in Montessori, so there's also no reason to cheat. What you could do is you could just create, and create. So for me, the Montessori actually, I the reason why I'm in education because I fell in love with the system, and the Montessori I think is a system that could go even beyond 21st century because its focus is really on the values, the self construction. That's very important. Creativity, inventions. That's where we are right now, and I think that's what the learners should have at this time when we do away from the textbooks, but really focus, as you
Hmm.
mentioned, on the projects, diba? But one thing also regarding the technology, because we never look at technology as a tool, we only see it as a source of entertainment. And even to children, when technology is introduced to them, it's introduced like that of video games, or they get to watch other things that it's not very passive learners. But if you introduce technology as a way for you to, to play around and create something out of that technology, and then you will then create inventors. So I think that's very important in how we would look at technology and how we could give it to the learners, because there's a lot of things that they could get in this 21st century out of understanding what technology really is. And in that way, now you have created uh, learners who then could create and could invent rather than use it for other passive entertainment um ways, diba?
Yeah. So thank you, Mariam. I'd like to boomerang to Sir Ray, because like talking about like we don't really know how to use technology in the right way, but it also allows me to recall, like especially like my brother is still in high school right now, and it reminds me of the times where technology is also used by teachers, and I would say uh, a wrong way, because I think there was actually a policy passed by DepEd that outlawed teachers from using Facebook as a what's happening is students are asked to create a video, for example, and then it becomes a like contest on Facebook. Then whoever gets the most number of likes or the most number of reactions, they get the highest grade. And then this is, I mean, that would be interesting, I would say, if like what Bolo said, it's used for let's say a marketing class. But then a lot of times these kinds of like contests actually come in the form of just like mathematics, or it's just talking about PE, or it's talking about science, and it kind of leaves the subject matter in which it was talking about.
Hi, Rico. Okay. For 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 us, professors and teachers today, we uh, shall we say we are tinatawag na digital migrants. It is really hard on our part, okay, to shift this kind of format that we call it the new normal, that we are using technology in imparting lessons to our students. As what you mentioned, you can hack and so on and so forth, in which I do not know, okay, because I am just a digital migrant, and you are a digital savvy, sa kamu mga batanon, mga millennials, centennials, and so on and so forth. Okay, but this is now the reality. We need, and I need to adapt the reality today, that I need to know more about technologies, so that there will be no, shall we say, uh, I will, the students will not be anymore be, shall I say, gitawag nga, as what Sir Bolo said, nga, wa na day maminaw. They are not anymore listening. Okay, just the video there and so on and so forth. Well, it's really hard on us, the old teachers today or professors. We don't have any computer classes during our high school, and even in college. When I was in college, yeah, I even don't know how to press enter and so on, so backspace and so on and so forth. That's why we are, uh, whether we like it or not, to survive for the professors, for the professors today, we need to know about the technology today. This is a globalized world that is now the reality. Mhm. As what Miss Marian said, Ma'am Marian said, okay, technology should be used not only for entertainment and also for educational purposes. There are a lot of things that we can learn by using technology, I believe. Mhm.
All right. Thank you, sir. So we're moving on to the last part. I think this is already the concluding part of our talk this afternoon. So I just like to end on a more of a positive note. On like I'm hoping that maybe students from around Cebu, around the Philippines, or maybe even around the world are listening to or are listening to our talk. So let's end with tips for students. So what kind of study habits do you practice, if any? Second, on how to maximize opportunities like joining organizations. And lastly, maybe what's your philosophy, or what do you think every student should hear, or maybe people in general, what should people really hear? So this is the concluding part of our afternoon, and let's start with Maria.
So I think I'll just share with you exactly what I told the children that I'm handling yesterday. We were I told them the importance for all the students out there, especially if you are at home, what then should you do? Of course, definitely you have to understand what is your strength, what are your strengths, and what are your weaknesses. You have to understand yourself. That's very important. And once you have identified your strengths and your weaknesses, why would those things matter? Because you have to go for the things that you really like and go for the craft that you really want. Okay. So now that we're still, I think we are in summer, and those who have been at home for quite a number of time, I told journaling is very important, especially for high school and all the way to college. That's one way to manage your time. And at the same time, there's a lot of boost up activities that you could do. The 30-day challenge is also present to create that kind of habit. I know habit is very difficult because you are at home, a place for rest, a place where you you should do nothing. But then again, this is our new normal. So we have to adjust on that one. So we have to maximize the opportunity that we are at home. I think every day it's a way for you to check how productive your day is. Or before the day starts, you ask yourself, how can I make this day productive? And that's a very personal question because each one of us has their own interest. And that alone, asking that question is already you making sure that your mind is learning, because the only way to do productive things is to do the things that you really like.
All right. Thank you, Mariam. So let's move to Bolo.
I'd like to recommend two study habits. So the first one is to seek the things that inspire you, that delight you, that fascinate you. Because once we find that out, then we'll just continue regardless without us even noticing. But secondly, I think that we need to take baby steps in terms to in order to form a habit. So for example, like 1 page per day of reading a book, that would be amazing because even on your worst day, like in that year, you'd be one book. And if you live until like the age of like 60, you'd be able to finish like 40 books, right? But then we'll even read like 2 pages, 3 pages. But I think like these baby steps that we do on a daily basis, they compound into things that are like great. Or for example, for me, like I make it a goal to learn like one Chinese word per day, and that's just it, like master one. And it's now less than a year, but now I can have like conversations with people who speak Mandarin. So I think those are the two things: find the things that you find fascinating, where you enjoy, and then create baby steps as habits where it's so underwhelming that it feels like, but in the matter of years or even just months, you'll see certain benefits on your way.
All right, great. Thank you, Bolo. All right, let's move
Hi,
on to Sir Ray.
hi, Miko. The best thing that students can do, I believe, during this quarantine time, if you have books there, whatever books that you can have, I just read and read and read and read, or anything that you can find in the internet that is sound interesting that you love to do and love as what Marian, Sir Bolo was ever mentioning that do what you love in your life so long as you are not stepping the other rights of other people. Pursue it, enhance what you have today. What is your strength as a person? Probably you enhance during the quarantine time. So enhance it and enhance and so on and so forth. That's it, Miko. That's probably the best thing that we can do. Okay, for students today, it's just a matter of the problem here that they don't have really kuan, especially for the young people. Asa man sila pa doon? Saan sila pupunta? Kasi si Sir Bolo ay Tagalog eh. Nagtatagalog na. Okay. Saan ba sila talaga pupunta? Ano ba yung direction mo? Okay. What's your direction? That's your goal in life. Okay. Uh, Put that in the mind. Okay. You parents. Okay. What do you want to be in life? Okay. You want to become rich? Okay. What are the steps that you're going to do to become rich? As what I mentioned earlier. Yeah. I want to become rich. What are the things that I should do to become rich? Okay. What career that I'm going to pursue? Okay. To become rich. Ganun ka. The things that you love, you just enhance it and find ways. Okay. Talk to people, experts, and so on and so forth. Okay. Thank you, Miko.
Thank you, sir. So I guess to really summarize for everyone, this who's listening, it's really about consuming education or educating yourself. So maybe some of us, maybe we're not very avid readers. So of course, like what Bolo mentioned, you can always start with just 1 page every day, 1 page to 2 pages. But always remember, just like what Mariam said also, uh, you can always use technology as a way to educate yourself. So you have Audible, you have audiobooks for free on YouTube. You have almost all of the books for free on Google. There's a way for you to find it. And it's really about educating yourself. So I guess one of the things we can really take away from this is that everyone must have a personal mastery over themselves. Because if we don't have that personal mastery, we're just a product of the systems or the infrastructures that we were already a part of. And we can already see that if you really want to be that much greater, it's about producing at a higher level. So that's it for this panel discussion. I'd like to thank all of my panelists, all of our guests for this episode. So if you enjoyed listening to our conversation, if you're interested to see more, please be sure to like and subscribe. So we really hope to, here at Speaking with Speakers, we hope to really help you have that conversation and listen to people who are in the know and listen to people who really have those ideas. And maybe you could also develop those ideas yourself. But for this episode, that's it. Thank you for listening. Like and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next episode.